This video is sponsored by LegalZoom. More about LegalZoom at the end of the video. Hey Wisecrack, Jared again. This is me at the midnight screening of The Dark Knight Rises back in 2012. Needless to say, I was out of my mind excited. But despite my Dark Knight infatuation, I couldn't help but be disappointed. The Dark Knight Rises is not necessarily a bad movie.
That comes later.
It just pales in comparison to its predecessor. But as with anything graced with the name Nolan, and by that I mean this one, this film has a lot of intellectual ambition. Unfortunately, not all of it pans out. So let's dive in to see what works and what doesn't. Welcome to the special Wisecrack Edition on The Dark Knight Rises. What went wrong? And of course, spoilers ahead. A lot of my disappointment with The Dark Knight Rises stems from its smart setup, but questionable execution. So let's start with one of its smartest elements, the very unexpected influence of Charles Dickens' A Tale of Two Cities. The Dark Knight Rises replicates most of the book's major themes, including social inequality, resurrection, and doubling. The most obvious thematic parallel with A Tale of Two Cities is social inequality.
The rich don't even go broke the same as the rest of us, huh?
The book's setting, the French Revolution, depicts a decadent aristocracy and their abuse of the poor. Likewise, the film portrays a similar class conflict through Bane's false revolution.
Now we come here not as conquerors, but as liberators to return control of this city to the people.
The third book in the novel is called Track of a Storm, and Catwoman says,
There's a storm coming, Mr. Wayne.
Then there's the theme of resurrection. In A Tale of Two Cities, Dickens frequently uses the phrase recalled to life to signify that his characters are metaphorically brought back from the dead. One of the main characters is metaphorically brought back to life when he sees his daughter after 18 years in the Bastille, or in his words, buried alive. Similarly, Bruce Wayne is metaphorically recalled to life when Catwoman steals his fingerprints, forcing him to leave Wayne Manor after 8 years of self-imposed isolation.
I care for no man on earth, and no man cares for me.
Another character named Carton is resurrected when he sacrifices himself for another character,
Take my coat. Hurry!
thus giving meaning to his aimless life. This arc is reflected in Catwoman,
I'll open that tunnel, then I'm gone.
There's more to you than that.
who overcomes her selfishness and saves Batman. This can also be likened to Officer Foley, who sacrifices his life to save Gotham after being complacent with the takeover.
These guys run the city. We've all got to keep our heads down till they can fix this.
Carton even quotes the story of Lazarus. Lazarus, of course, being the guy Christ resurrected in the Bible. Bruce is metaphorically resurrected when he rebuilds his strength and climbs out of the Lazarus pit. Darnay, the guy Carton saved, is given a second chance at life when he is spared from execution. And Bruce is again metaphorically resurrected when we find out at the end that he is in fact not dead, and is given a second chance to live a more rewarding life. Even the title The Dark Knight Rises invokes a phoenix rising from the ashes. The poster for the film swaps out a phoenix for the bat symbol, and chapter 23 of A Tale of Two Cities is called Fire Rises.
Have we started the fire?
Yes, the fire rises.
Oh yeah, and both texts feature a capitalist named Stryver.
But no mistake, Mr. Stryver.
At Batman's funeral, Gordon even reads this line about Carton's sacrifice and moral resurrection straight from the end of A Tale of Two Cities.
It is a far, far better thing that I do
It is a far, far better thing that I do
than I have ever done.
than I have ever done.
Finally, there's the theme of doubling. You've probably heard the opening lines, it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. This contrasting between pairs, between best of times and worst of times, between age of wisdom and foolishness, between epic of belief and incredulity, happens throughout the whole book. There are two Manets, two cities, London and Paris, Darnay has two trials, and Darnay and Carton look the exact same. In The Dark Knight Rises, there's two cities, Gotham and Bane's Underground, Batman and Bane, two League of Shadows alums who deal with unbearable pain,
Left him in perpetual agony. The mask holds the pain at bay.
one born in privilege, another born in hell. Blake and Batman are both orphans with anger issues.
Not a lot of people know what it feels like, do they? Be angry in your bones.
And a constant reminder of the division between body and soul.
Torture.
Yeah, but not of your body, of your soul.
So what we've got here is probably the most graceful thematic adaptation from a classic to a comic book movie in existence. But the problem is that on top of developing new themes borrowed from A Tale of Two Cities, the film also has to juggle the themes established in The Dark Knight. And here's where the film starts to stumble. One of the essential themes of The Dark Knight is truth versus lies. The Dark Knight ends with a noble lie.
I killed those people.
Batman takes responsibility for Harvey Dent's murders, thus denying the fall of Gotham's savior and upholding the image of him as an ideal symbol of justice and hope.
A thug who showed his true nature when he betrayed the trust of this great man.
Herein lies one of the most squandered opportunities of the film.
I believed in Harvey Dent.
Many incredible works end with a noble lie. In Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, for example, Marlowe lies to Kurtz's widow by telling her that Kurtz's last words were her name, saving her from the truth that he died a deranged psychopath. Or, in Alan Moore's Watchmen, the team agrees to preserve Ozymandias' lie that millions were killed by an extraterrestrial force, in order to maintain peace between the US and the USSR. However, both Heart of Darkness and Watchmen end without the truth ever coming out. We're left to ponder, what's more important, the truth or the saving lie? The Dark Knight leaves us with this same ambiguity, but The Dark Knight Rises picks up where these stories left off. Thematically, of course. So finally, we get to see what happens when a noble lie is exposed to the vulgar truth.
Maybe it's time we all stop trying to outsmart the truth and let it have its day.
Does the film live up to the challenge? Unfortunately, not really. At the beginning of The Dark Knight Rises, we see that the noble lie has manifested itself in the Dent Act, a piece of legislation that allows cops increased power to prosecute organized crime.
No city is without crime, but this city is without organized crime because the Dent Act gave law enforcement teeth in its fight against the mob.
There are two ways this can be read. One, we can read it as a metaphor for the Patriot Act, a law criticized for giving the government a dangerous amount of power to fight terrorism. Considering many interpret the Joker's radicalism as a reflection of Al-Qaeda extremism, this makes sense. Or two, Harvey Dent can be read as a Christ figure without resurrection, a kind of atheistic interpretation. Imagine if Christ never came back to life, but people fabricated the lie that he did in order to maintain his divine status and create a religious institution founded on a lie. Based on this reading, Christ, like Dent, would be a false idol, but one that must be upheld in order to maintain peace and hope.
So that I could, to my shame, build a lie around this fallen idol.
Gothamites even celebrate his legacy with Harvey Dent Day, which I'm sure will be moved to late December to stimulate the economy.
Harvey Dent Day may not be our oldest public holiday, but we're here tonight because it's one of the most important.
Considered in this light, the Dent Act can be likened to the way that religion has been used to justify overreaching acts of power like the Inquisition. As juicy as this sounds, neither of these extended metaphors actually pan out, because contrary to what the film wants us to assume, there's no evidence that the product of the lie is corrupt. In fact, the Dent Act seems to work wonders.
When you and Dent cleaned up the streets, you cleaned them good. Pretty soon we'll be chasing down overdue library books.
Once Bane reveals the truth that Harvey Dent is a false idol and the Dent Act is built off this lie, it leads to social unrest. So is the film trying to say that bad stuff happens when the truth is revealed? It seems so, considering when Alfred reveals the truth about Rachel choosing Dent over Bruce.
What if before she died, she wrote a letter saying she chose Harvey Dent over you?
It just drives them further apart and encourages Bruce to go on his suicide mission. But the problem comes when the film doubles back to the conclusion at the end of The Dark Knight, because everything is only fixed when the truth is buried and another lie is established.
Set it to fly out over the water, then eject?
No autopilot.
At the end, Wayne lies about the Bat's autopilot being broken so that he can fake his death.
Mr. Fox, it's already been fixed. Software patch, 6 months ago.
Check the ID on the patch.
Bruce Wayne.
Thus, the narrative of Batman sacrificing himself for Gotham creates another image of justice for Gotham to revere. The final lines from A Tale of Two Cities that Gordon quotes during Bruce's funeral reflect Carton's Christ-like sacrifice, thereby suggesting that Batman's sacrifice is also Christ-like. However, as the final shots of the movie prove, Batman did not sacrifice himself for Gotham. But perhaps it's necessary to believe the lie that he did, just as it was necessary to believe the lie that Harvey Dent was noble to the end. After spending nearly 3 fucking hours to find out how this theme of truth will develop, we end up exactly at the same spot as the end of The Dark Knight, establishing the necessity of a lie to uphold faith in justice. If the theme of the noble lie were to truly develop, we might be presented with a scenario in which the toxic lies lead to so much corruption that revealing the lie would be more beneficial than letting it fester and destroy Gotham. The film attempts to do this by suggesting that the corruption of the Dent Act leads to Bane's social revolution, as evidenced by Gordon's quote.
The Batman wasn't needed anymore. We won. By stone of lie, none of this evil rising from where we tried to bury it.
Bane is supposed to be the outcome of this toxic lie. Given Gordon's words, it seems like Bane was meant to function like the Joker did, as a product of escalation. In The Dark Knight, we get super clear exposition that shows the state of society that leads to the rise of the Joker.
Nah, man, I don't like it tonight. What are you, superstitious? You got more chance of winning the Powerball than running into him.
Batman has put so many drug dealers out of business and inspired so much fear.
You don't like what I have to offer, you can buy from someone else. Assuming Batman left anyone to buy from.
That the mob has been pushed to desperation, leading to the rise of a radically antithetical form of Batman's brand of justice, the Joker.
I thought my jokes were bad.
It seems Gordon was trying to suggest that when abusive power based on a lie leads to unsavory political and economic tensions, a violent reaction is bound to happen. But once again, we have no evidence of this corruption at the hands of the Dent Act or the lie that justifies it. In one scene, Catwoman tricks a man threatening her life by making him use the cell phone of a missing congressman, and seconds later, the police bombard in. This can be read as an indication that the Dent Act allows for the monitoring of everyone's cell phones, which would make sense given the Patriot Act parallel. But the problem is, this saves Catwoman's life. Without this kind of power, Catwoman would be dead. Why not show us the negative consequences of invasive surveillance? The film throws away this opportunity to comment on how those in power can use a lie to justify excessive authority. This brings us to the second theme of the movie, pain.
Is it really painful?
You're very welcome to try it, Alfred.
This theme, like Truth, spends nearly 3 hours developing just to bring us back to where we started. At the beginning, Bruce, stricken with physical pain and the pain of losing Rachel, doesn't leave his mansion. He overcomes his pain when he heals his back and escapes the Lazarus Pit. But he ultimately gives in to pain again when he decides to stop being Batman, fucks off to Italy, and starts living that bored billionaire lifestyle. Now, I'm going to bring another literary work in here to possibly defend the cyclical nature of these two themes. George Orwell's Animal Farm. See, in Animal Farm, Orwell does a very clever thing. The term revolution is given a double meaning. On the one hand, it denotes the revolution when the animals overthrow their human oppressors. But the original definition of revolution is also given significance because the novel comes full circle. It revolves. At the end, the pigs are just like the humans they overthrew. Greedy capitalists. So could the Nolans be playing with this double meaning of the word revolution by having the themes of pain and truth come full circle in a film about social revolution? Maybe. Or maybe I'm just giving them too much credit. You guys decide. The third major theme in the film is social inequality, but whereas A Tale of Two Cities aptly displays the decadence and corruption of the elite that leads to social unrest, The Dark Knight Rises gives us a vague, muddy, and almost nonsensical display of the social tensions that lead to Bane's false revolution against the rich.
It's not our money, it's everybody's.
Really? Mine's in my mattress.
According to Bane, Blackgate Prison is a symbol of the Dent Act's oppression.
Behind you stands a symbol of oppression.
Blackgate is overcrowded, men and women sometimes share cell blocks, and criminals under the Dent Act don't get parole. Sure, it's harsh and unjust, but it's hardly the gratuitous cruelty we see in, say, A Tale of Two Cities.
Fear and slavery keep the scum obedient.
These unfortunate realities seem to pale in comparison to the overwhelming success of the Dent Act.
There are 1,000 inmates in Blackgate Prison as a direct result of the Dent Act. These are violent criminals, essential cogs in the organized crime machine.
Especially considering that the law's inability to fight crime is a central conflict of the first two films.
Coney's men. Does it matter? We'll never turn to it anyway.
And even if Blackgate was wrongfully imprisoning people, how does that translate to overthrowing the rich? Blackgate is a clear stand-in for the Bastille during the French Revolution, and drawing that analogy out farther, the Dent Act is meant to be the French lettre de cachet, a kind of warrant issued by the King of France that detained people without being burdened by annoying shit like proof or reasonable suspicion. The Bastille became a symbol for the excesses of the king's authority. People could be thrown in jail for practicing the wrong religion, or criticizing the government, or pissing off the wrong nobleman at the wrong time. And when popular rage finally reached a breaking point, the Bastille was an obvious target. Problem is, this analogy doesn't really fit because Blackgate does none of these things. King Louis didn't go around eradicating the mob and making France safe with his authority, and if the Gotham police are abusing their authority, like Louis, we're not shown it. I also suppose that this would have complicated the final showdown scene in which the cops are the good guys. So if the Dent Act alone doesn't justify people overthrowing Gotham's social structures, maybe it's something else? The kid in the orphanage suggests that the economic situation is making orphans go into the sewers and join Bane's army.
There's work down there.
Work?
kind of work you gonna find in the sewers?
More than you can find up here, I guess.
But we're given zero indication on how the Dent Act or Blackgate are disenfranchising the poor. The only evidence we see of elite corruption is when Daggett tries to steal Wayne Enterprises from Bruce Wayne. But that's the rich screwing over the rich, not the rich screwing over the poor. Some people have condemned The Dark Knight Rises as anti-Occupy Wall Street propaganda for this very reason.
I said no rhyme.
It shows a society that seeks vengeance on the rich for no other reason than they're rich, and sets up kangaroo courts to punish them.
No lawyer, no witnesses. What sort of due process is this?
Without actually establishing what these people are rebelling against, it makes it look like the film is painting Occupy activists as nothing more than easily manipulated fascistic clowns. It's more of an issue of underdeveloped world building and not necessarily politically charged moralizing. As I said earlier, The Dark Knight Rises is far from a bad film. It unfortunately falls a bit short, but so goes the tragedy with many trilogies. With so many subplots, so many characters, so much ambition, and it being so long, it's hard not to see why some of this got a little messy. None of this even takes into account that this whole social unrest scenario is an elaborate fabrication from the League of Shadows to destroy Gotham, which of course begs the question, why even bother with all this French Revolution stuff? But that's gonna have to be a subject for another video. With a little more finessing and a tad more attention on world building, this film could have been a wisecrackian wet dream and a fitting conclusion to one of the best trilogies of our time. It's almost that, but it's not. Thanks for watching, Wisecrack. Peace. But just because this movie is a bit of a mess doesn't mean your legal work has to be. See what I did there? LegalZoom is the smart way to take care of your legal needs, and they made the process of setting up a new business and more a total breeze. LegalZoom eliminates the guesswork of having to find an attorney you trust, wondering how much your legal work will cost, and having to take unnecessary trips to a lawyer's office, which always has terrible parking anyway. LegalZoom works with a network of independent attorneys to help you with all sorts of projects: the formation of your company, wills and trusts, trademarks and patents, contracts, and more. When we decided to do Wisecrack full-time, it was really important that we set up our business right. Separating our personal stuff from the company and navigating all the intricacies of state and local laws can be a huge pain. But LegalZoom offers the services and resources to make sure you get it done right. Whether you need the help with your business, family planning, or general legal advice, LegalZoom is there to help. Wisecrack fans get 15% off their purchase, so head to LegalZoom.com/Wisecrack to get started and save 15% today. Thanks to LegalZoom for sponsoring this video. And hey, once again guys, thanks so much for watching. We've got lots more plans, so make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a thing. I gotta put the finishing touches on our next Westworld video, so catch you later guys. Peace.